The effects of a natural disaster on the other side of the country might be felt here in Las Vegas soon. Last week, an EF3 tornado leveled part of a Pfizer plant in North Carolina. All the injuries reported were minor, but the FDA is warning that the widespread damage could mean a tighter supply of some life-saving medications. This comes as shortages for other types of medications are already being felt. Mike Allen joins us now to explain what's going on. Mike?
Yeah, John, the damage to this Pfizer plant might just wind up affecting the access that people have to medications like lidocaine, morphine, and other life-saving medications as well, on top of that, at hospitals and urgent care centers.
Depending on how long it may take for this plant to get back online, it could drastically impact how many drugs we can get out to these hospital systems.
Dr. Christina Madison, a local pharmacist, says shortages could be a reality now that the plant that supplies 8% of all sterile injectables in America is offline.
Is a big chunk when you think about how many different hospital systems and places use, medications that are either injected or come in a way that need to have like an IV associated with them.
Currently, there's no timetable for repairs, and the products made in that plant, like painkillers, chemotherapy fluids, and other critical medications, are not being produced there until the roof is replaced.
And it is something to be concerned about because we don't know how long it's going to take for this plant to get back online.
These are not the only drugs facing or currently seeing a nationwide shortage.
They're having troubles getting their pain medication prescriptions filled.
A viewer called into the rant saying he's having to wait a long time for his pain meds to become available.
I'm hurting on a regular day-to-day basis, and this pain medication just helps to try and curb it a little bit. What are people supposed to do that need the pain medication just to survive on a day-to-day basis?
There are many different reasons for the shortages of other drugs, but one complicating factor that could make Southern Nevada harder hit than other areas in terms of sterile injectables is our heat.
That does make us a little bit more susceptible to some of those shortages because we do have to maintain these sterile products at a particular temperature.
Little silver lining, though. The doctor tells me it's a good thing this isn't happening during the fall because that's when the cold, flu, RSV, and other kinds of illnesses really start spreading. Reporting live tonight, Mike Allen, Fox 5 News, local Las Vegas.
And Pfizer has said it's working to move production to other facilities as the one in North Carolina gets repaired.